Previously on Forever Chemicals.
Experts and product producers weighed in on the fact that PFAS contamination is an issue, and that having a truly PFAS-free product may not be entirely possible due to the high levels of pollution that span the globe.
If I start with what is PFAS? PFAS is a very big group of fluororganic chemicals and polymers. They have what we call extraordinary properties.
PFAS are industrial chemicals, and the carbon-fluorine bond is perhaps the strongest in the periodic table. It takes the energy of lightning to break it.
PFAS are known as forever chemicals.
The chemical industry knew that PFAS could be harmful.
So it's used in places that folks don't think. It's in every pizza box that you've gotten a pizza in. It's in your coffee cup at your favorite coffee joint around the corner. It's in cosmetics. It's everywhere.
PFAS chemicals are wreaking havoc on our health and environment.
It's a really serious issue.
So there's health impacts and there are environmental impacts.
So many of them have been found to last essentially on geologic time.
Difficult to remove, difficult to filter, and then once removed and filtered, difficult to dispose of. They have been found to bioaccumulate in people and animals and have been found in almost every living creature on Earth.
We need to eliminate our apparent appetite for using PFAS.
The environmental impacts are pretty potent. Many of us refer to these as forever chemicals.
Throughout this series, we learned not only how harmful PFAS is as a class of chemicals, but also what the outdoor industry is doing to address the issue. While we may have started too late, we are on the right track now, but the work is far from over. Learning about PFAS is just the beginning, and as we heard in episode 5 from Nick Wax, alternative chemistry has existed for at least 45 years, if not longer. Yet, to be compliant with existing and upcoming regulations, many brands are scrambling to keep up.
Being compliant with the legislation is moving us faster than we want from either a performance standpoint or potentially a safety standpoint. The words regrettable substitution is really good in this conversation.
A number of outdoor industry brands have been at the forefront, though, of developing these alternatives, understanding what can we do to replace these things. What alternative pathways have we already been studying for the last decade that would phase this chemistry out? I think the outdoor industry was some of the first to get out of C8, which was this long chain PFAS like PFOA and PFOS, and switch to C6. And it turns out that in some ways that was a regrettable substitution, that certain C6 chemicals have been found to be just as bad as that C8. But that kind of transition shows the readiness of the industry to move again. And I think outdoor brands are really well positioned to implement this kind of phase out in a way that not every industry is.
As the outdoor industry has begun to learn more about the harmful effects of PFAS in the last 5 to 10 years, there were efforts to move from long-chain C8 chemistry to short-chain C6 chemistry, an example of a regrettable substitute. And even before that transition occurred, we can use BPA as an example as to why we need to be cautious with chemical substitutes.
We know that there are some problematic alternatives that are out there, such as siloxanes. It's another class of chemicals that also pose environmental and public health hazards. So that's an example of class of chemicals that we recommend brands and manufacturers steer clear of. And I think, if anything, that's one of my most important messages that I have for regulators in the business community. Yes, we need to get away from PFAS, but also we need to ensure the substitutes are safe. And we can look at other chemicals to understand this. About 15 years ago, myself and many other groups were pushing on companies to ban bisphenol A in products like baby bottles and food packaging and thermal receipt paper. What did the industry do? In some cases, they substituted bisphenol A for bisphenol S, the chemical cousin of BPA, which now we are learning also poses health hazards just like BPA did. So let's not repeat the mistakes of BPA, and let's not repeat the mistakes of long-chain PFAS. As companies and regulators are restricting PFAS, let's ensure that the substitutes are also safe, again, for not only us as consumers, but the communities, workers where this stuff is made, and then also in the larger environment when materials get disposed of.
While we need to be cautious with alternative chemistry, there are several viable alternatives to PFAS.
If you take a look at the research that is coming out of the state of Washington, I would encourage you to take a close look at their regulatory determination reports that have come out over the last year as they've considered restricting PFAS. They've actually identified a number of viable alternatives to different uses of PFAS in different product categories. We published a report a couple of years ago looking at the use of PFAS in the apparel industry. In that study that we put out back in 2022, we had identified widespread use of PFAS in different types of materials. One of the types of alternatives that appear safer that we think is viable include different types of waxes, like paraffin waxes, which historically have been quite common in the outdoor apparel industry. Green Theme Technologies is an example of a company that is developing alternatives for the outdoor industry. And that company has developed an alternative that not only, from what we're told from folks in the industry, performs quite well, but also has a lower toxicity footprint. So there are viable alternatives that are out there for many uses of PFAS. One of the most common uses of PFAS in many of our homes is in cookware, in products like Teflon pans. Well, a really great alternative to Teflon pans is cast iron pans, which are incredibly durable, are safer, and can last for generations. If you take a look at food packaging, many food packaging materials, especially things that are food packaging materials that are used for grease and water resistant, there are viable alternatives like paper that is treated with bio-based formulations, not sourced from petrochemicals. So there are plenty of viable alternatives that are out there. Governments around the world are conducting more and more research into alternatives. We're also beginning to see businesses invest financial resources to help evaluate safer alternatives to PFAS. For example, there's an organization called ChemForward. They have been bringing different businesses and other stakeholders together to pool financial resources and invest in research to evaluate alternatives to chemicals like PFAS. So that's an example of a way in which businesses can come together and invest financial resources and work together to identify safer alternatives to problematic toxic chemicals like PFAS. So in many cases, there are plenty of viable alternatives. In some industries, there may not be alternatives yet, but let's not forget the American spirit. The American spirit is one of innovation. If we can put people on the moon, certainly we can find safer alternatives to chemicals that are found in everyday products all around us. It might take time, it's going to take money, but it's the right thing to do for our health and environment.
So essentially what we're talking about in this class of chemicals are fluorocarbons. And fluorocarbons, they're exceptionally durable and incredibly effective. The more or less only other class of chemistry in use in these type of applications are hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are fairly good. They were at the very beginning of the outdoor industry. A lot of what was used were hydrocarbons. The challenge with hydrocarbons is they're not what's called oleophobic. They're not oil repellent. They are water repellent. They also don't have that same level of durability. And so the issue is both if you have body oils or, if you're camping and eating and you have some oil on your hands and that gets onto your outerwear or your tent or your backpack, if it's treated with a hydrocarbon, that's going to defeat that water repellency pretty quickly. And so what a lot of companies are needing to do is transition to a really potent story of care and repair. And that in many ways families into broader sustainability stories, right? I mean, we should all be using the products we have more for more years and longer duration. And so the care and repair in this place serves two purposes. One, it's going to be more and more necessary for consumers to retreat outerwear with water repellency as the transition goes to hydrocarbons, hydrocarbon DWRs. It's also a great story just because it compels people to think about how to take better care of their products so they last longer. So yeah, it's a huge challenge for any company that needs their products to be water repellent. And I guess the good news is the hydrocarbon DWRs work well. They're quite safe and they just require more maintenance and retreatment.
Many of the brands that were on the forefront of developing these technologies were featured in episode 6 of this podcast, including Fjallraven, Jack Wolfskin, Keen, and Houdini Sportswear. While they are not the only innovators in this space, as an industry, we can look to them as an example of how these transitions can be done with intention and compliance with scientific evidence. One of the primary problems many companies face in the outdoor industry is that alternatives may never necessarily perform quite as well, but that was a sacrifice they were willing to make.
The only case where we have had to discuss, compromises with performance, not overall performance, but the fact that we had to discuss whether it was okay for our garments to go PFAS-free, but then also require some more care, like DWR treatments, retreatments, of course PFAS-free as well. But it's the only time when we haven't gone about with a sustainability innovation and also improved performance and comfort and quality, but rather had a challenge. Just a fact, but it didn't make us hesitant. We just need to figure out how to do it and how to support our customers in the transition as well and our users. But it was a given for us that moving away from PFAS had to be done at speed.
The PFAS were so durable and so performing that actually even now we have to admit the performance of the alternative. They are not as good as PFAS. But we have to look into that ourselves and find a way, or let's say discuss internally if the performance of the PFAS is not even too high, if we really need so high performance for our products. And we realized that we definitely could work with less because PFAS, the PFCs, they are not only water repellent, they are also dirt and oil repellent, which you don't really need on the outdoor products. You need it still in other industries, and that's why there are still used there because there are no other alternatives. But the alternatives that we work with, they are only water repellent. That's why we always had to find a compromise between, performance and environment and sustainability. And there is not only one perfect alternative to all the products. There are several alternatives. And this was one of the reasons why it took so long and why it was a very big hurdle for us, because we realized that depending on the construction of the fabric, depending on the composition, there was different alternatives that perform differently. So we always had to go through a long process for each and every material that we wanted to change to find the best performing and the most durable option of those alternatives. In general, what was our goal is to find chemicals that, let's say, increase the tension between the surface of the material and the water, because the higher the tension, the more hydrophobic a material then is, and the more the water is dropping and draining easily.
To replace it with something just as good, that I think I need to, with all transparency, speak to. Having a DWR without PFAS, it's not as good. It doesn't work as well. And I'm sorry, we've had to stand in front of many sales teams. We've had to stand in front of many customers and saying, no, it's not as good, but it's the hit we're willing to take because there's no alternative. It has to, this is what, without using that chemical, this is what we can get. And we still held fast to our decision. They weren't all easy days. There were a couple of days where we really,
many setbacks.
Yeah, we really had setbacks, even mistakes in factories where we've got everything all settled up and we've changed membranes and we've changed, DWRs and we've done all this work and then a mistake happens.
And separate production lines and all those kind of things, which you have to do because you cannot run fabric in the same machinery as PFAS products because then you have contamination and then it's waste anyhow. So you need to, it's a big thing. It's a big transformation to make this happen.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be really transparent about that is it as good? Good chemicals are good. They work. They're there because they really, really work. And PFAS, to its credit, it works. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's the downside of it is the reason we all need to get rid of it because it doesn't it works forever and it never goes away and it's not good.
And it's a very cheap way of solving problems.
An incredibly cheap way of solving problems. But I mean, after we attacked the first round, we had many setbacks. We had to recall things from the market because we did not have, the factory was not split into far enough apart to where we didn't have contamination. So we've learned and learned, sometimes the same lesson twice, but we've gotten it.
And Greenpeace made a great job because they were on our back, of course, knowing that we were in this process, and they caught us. Of course, they caught us. They found PFAS in our EcoShell products, thanks to their testing methods, took us into that moment that, okay, guys, you run products and you claim you're PFAS free, but you're not. And that was a good thing because then we dived even deeper and solved that problem again. Then we came out with another level of.
And then we understood more. We understood contamination more than we understood when going into it. We just thought if you don't put it on the product, it will not be in the product. That is not so. It is much deeper than that. So that we learned, thank goodness for that, for Greenpeace, that pushed us into diving deeper into it. But even when we got past shell, then it was like opening Pandora's box. Everywhere we looked, we were using it on materials that we didn't even need waterproofness or durable water repellency or anything like that. It was such a part of routine in production. Fabric suppliers would put it on everything because it makes the fabric better. It makes it stronger. It makes it hold long. And that made sense to everyone. I said the more and more we tested through all of our product, the more places that we could not imagine that would be there. And I said a lining on the side of a sleeping bag, that at no point do you feel, but that needs to be durable and water repellent. But it's there. And it's there because nobody knows why they put it there, but they're just saying, but it's a good thing. So the more we dig, the more work we have to do. And will we ever be done? I don't know, actually. Will we ever really be able to say we're PFAS free? I don't know, unfortunately.
If the industry has learned anything throughout this process, it may be that they shouldn't rely on government regulation to move them in the most sustainable direction. In many cases, we can make more impactful changes faster when companies do the research, consult science, and address the problem internally and collaboratively with other brands.
How long of a journey this has been for our industry. Personally, I've been involved in conversations about PFAS. We didn't even call it PFAS at the time, PFCs or what have you, since mid-1990s. And we're only now really getting to the place where we're going to be getting it out of the system. The challenge is, let's become aware of everything. Let's also recognize that we can't always rely on our governments to solve these problems for us. I went to the EPA in 2005 or 7 and asked them very clearly about we were moving from long chain fluorinated to short chain fluorinated as an industry. And I was representing the industry, in my role at REI, but also in this OIA sustainability work. And I asked them, please tell me as much as you know about short chain, because we don't want to move to another sinking island. And they couldn't. It was all confidential business information. And so we knew that long chain was bad, but we didn't know enough about short chain. And so as a result, we made this big push in saying we've all moved from C8 to C6. Well, it's another sinking island. And so our opportunity as an industry is really, don't always rely that our government is going to help us on this here. We have to really be informed and collaborative and focused on really understanding the challenges. And it's not just chemistry. And this is a collaborative effort that is going to allow us to do everything that we say, we do to not just, protect our outdoors, but really build product in better supply chains and in better ways that ultimately is something we can be proud of.
As we move forward and continue to address PFAS in production, it's important to note that PFAS is not the only problem our industry faces, and it certainly won't be the last time that we need to band together to address harmful production practices such as this.
PFAS is not the biggest chemical problem the outdoor industry faces. Yes, it might be from a regulatory perspective, absolutely, and I don't want to take that away. But from a human health perspective, it's not the biggest problem. It is other things like solvents, toxic solvents, that are so prevalent in their use throughout our industry. We have a love affair with polyurethane, which is an incredibly good, incredibly effective material used in so many different places. But in most cases, when we use polyurethane, if you're going to coat something or create a laminate, you have to use solvents to dissolve it. And then ultimately those solvents are a process chemical. They're not something that is designed to be in the finished product. So the human health problem is not for the end consumer. It could be if it was a sloppy process and too much solvent remained in the product, but most of the health issues are with the worker. And that too many of the manufacturers are not up to standard as to managing their solvents. So these solvents, which are incredibly volatile, they evaporate pretty quickly, but become part of the air, become the ambient workplace. It could be an air emission. It could be dissolved into the water stream. These are a huge human health problem because of it being so far upstream from many brands' visibility that they're not paying as much attention to them. And so I would argue that this is a much bigger human health problem, but it's for a different class of people. It's not the end consumer, it's the worker who's making that. And so that is something that we as an industry really need to do a much better job of getting our heads around and working to mitigate where we need to and innovate to come up with alternatives that use these solvents. But again, it's similar to PFAS, that it's a highly effective, highly cost-efficient way to produce a high-performing material, microporous structures, or all the things that we like in a good PU coating or a laminate is really dependent upon the use of these chemistries.
Hi, my name is Gabriella Whitaker, and I am the Director of Sustainability at Polycore. Polycore is a textile technology company, and we specialize in polyurethane coatings. So when we talk about PFAS and solvents, it's important to note they are not one and the same. Unfortunately, solvents are a whole other class of chemicals that are going to need their own restrictions and legislation. The primary solvents used in the textile industry include DMF, toluene, DMAC, and MEK. A typical coating facility will use around 1 million kilos of solvent every year, and those solvents usually have a global warming potential of at least 3 times that of CO2. These toxic solvents are known as CMR solvents, and that stands for carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic. The problems caused by solvents predominantly impact workers rather than consumers. This has contributed to the issue being overlooked for so long because the consumer doesn't see it.
Many solvents are used in what is labeled as a PU coating on textiles.
Polyurethane coatings are commonly referred to as PU coatings. PU is a type of plastic that's seen in many everyday products in many different forms. It can be tailored to be rigid, flexible, or even a foam. PU is used in a coating form in architecture, construction, and textiles. You'll see PU coatings used in the outdoor industry to improve abrasion resistance and hydrostatic resistance in textiles. That's waterproofness. So you'll find them on backpacks, luggage, tents, and some outerwear. So generally, PU coatings won't be used as a replacement for PFAS coatings because the PU is used on the back of a fabric while the PFAS coating would be on the face. However, at Polycore, we do sometimes use what we call a kiss coat of water-based PU coating on the face of the fabric instead of that DWR. I think that PU kiss coating can be a good replacement for DWR on bags and backpacks and gear. However, right now it's not breathable, so it's not a good solution for outdoor apparel. There are different types of PU coatings, and this is where kind of that clean chemistry aspect comes in. So traditionally, PU coatings are solvent-based. Solvents facilitate dispersion, so they act as a base for the PU to be dissolved in. That resulting solution is applied to the textile, and as it dries, the solvent evaporates. When a solvent evaporates, it becomes volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, and these cause very serious health and environmental issues. The other type of PU coating is water-based, so instead of dissolving in a solvent, the PU is just dissolved into water. We call this WPU, So water-based technology is newer and it does not use solvents at all. It can now reach the same level of performance as a solvent-based PU, and I believe eventually we will see an industry-wide switch to water-based PU. Since we're on the topic of textile coatings, I will add that we are now exploring water-based PET coatings. So PET is another class of plastic, just like PU, but PET is super recyclable. So polyester and your standard plastic water bottles, those are all PET plastic. So when we apply our new PET coating to a polyester fabric, it creates a monomaterial. We're quickly working to develop and scale these PET coatings to increase circularity in the outdoor industry.
Some solvents are listed within the 6 classes of harmful chemicals, and the industry use of PU or solvent-based coatings or linings pose a human health risk that should not be ignored by the industry. Unfortunately, the changes in production that should occur do not end with PFAS and solvents.
In production of apparel, we work a lot dyeing. The dyeing process is one of the most polluting part of the whole textile chain processes. There we still have to do a lot. We work a lot with different possibilities. And here also all the industry, the suppliers that we work with, they are a lot more educated nowadays. They are more willing to work with us on new solutions in this area, in this direction. So that's one big part. And there are several different options, more or less sustainable, but definitely always more sustainable than the conventional dyeing process. But in general, I think the biggest topic that we have in the textile industry that it's coming up, that all of us will work with, is the textile waste that we have to stop and that we have to use. And this is obviously the next super big topic in our industry.
What isn't unique about PFAS is that we've seen PFAS type things before. The outdoor industry has dealt with other types of chemicals that have been identified as harmful to health or the environment and has worked to phase those out. And we will find more in the future. They'll focus on different materials. They tend to be centered on a specific material set or a specific product set, but it'll happen again. The question is what? And if I had that kind of crystal ball, I'd be a pretty well-off lawyer, but I'm not totally sure what the next PFAS is.
It's true. The outdoor industry has faced problems like PFAS before, and it is inevitable that we will again. What makes me as a consumer and participant in this industry optimistic is that across the board, there's a strong willingness for brands to collaborate with one another, whether they are competitors or not.
Something that our industry has always been good at doing is putting the good of all first. And I think sustainability specifically is one area where people really come together. They might be competitors on a footwear wall, but they share quote unquote trade secrets or, lobby together for the protection of wild places or whatever it might be. So I think now more than ever, we just need to lean into this community of, people who care deeply about what it is that we make and what we make it for. So yeah. Sharing innovation, sharing secrets, quote unquote, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing.
In the next and final episode in the Forever Chemicals series, we look at the path ahead with PFAS. One of the biggest challenges with this particularly invasive and persistent class of chemicals is that they have no ability to break down or degrade naturally. So even if we eliminate them from production completely, all of the PFAS that has been created will continue to exist. We'll hear from remediation experts and scientists on how they're working to remove PFAS from the environment and what we can expect from future regulations regarding cleanup efforts. If you want to learn more about what PFAS are, where they're found, the proven health effects, how you can limit your exposure, up-to-date news on PFAS, and how to get involved in PFAS regulatory efforts, visit toxicfreefuture.org, foodandwaterwatch.org, or pfascentral.org. Snaplinc Consulting provided expert fact-checking and guidance for the creation of this podcast. Snaplinc Consulting provides corporate sustainability strategies and ESG support across a broad range of industries, including apparel, footwear, home furnishings, software, cosmetics, professional services, and more. Head to snaplinkconsulting.com to learn more and contact the experts to guide you through complex topics like CSRD, PFAS, greenhouse gas assessments, SBTI, CDP, EcoVadis, B Corp, and many more compliance and certification frameworks. Forever Chemicals is a Black-Footed Ferret production. All the source material for this episode can be found in the show notes or at theoutdoorminimalist.com/foreverchemicals. As an independent podcast, we rely on listener support as our primary avenue for funding. If you like this show and our other content, consider donating to our GoFundMe. The link is in the show notes.